Hi, I'm Wes, the Explosion, this is the Backlog, and I finally cleared the roguelite I was working on, One Step from Eden by Ristasia LLC. This is an indie, deck-building, roguelite, grid-based battle game, or something like that. I'll explain, but watching what's going on screen is going to be very helpful for this one. In this game, battles take place in a 4x8 grid, with the left 4x4 being yours and the right your opponent's. Your main method of offense comes in the form of cards. You create a deck of these and they come into your hand up to 2 at a time. If you run out of usable cards, your deck gets shuffled, or you can do it manually if you choose, which will take a few seconds. Each card has a mana cost from 0 to 5 and mana regenerates over time. If you try to use a card with a higher cost than your max mana, it just gets discarded. The card's abilities are varied, from damage to how they're used to different effects. Some of these status effects are obvious, such as root or slow. Some, the basics are obvious, but how they work exactly needs explanation, like poison, and some you need to learn what exactly they do, like frost and trinity. As you'd expect from a deck builder, while it's not bad to use a more straightforward strategy starting out, learning what everything does and experimenting with different builds is a good bit of the fun. That ties into the roguelite elements, first and foremost being the drops you get each run. At the end of each battle, you get a selection of 3 chips to choose from to add to your deck. After some rounds with better rewards, or when you level up during a run, you can also get 1, 2, 3 passive buffs to choose from. If none of the proffered rewards are appealing, in either category, you can skip. After the first battle, you can select up to 2 focuses, making cards and abilities of a certain type appear more often, so it's easier to customize your build the way you want. The other randomized element are the maps. There are 8 stages in a run. Each one starts with a basic battle and ends with a boss, but in between, the path branches out into 3 intersecting lines. There are basic battles, along with some that feature extra hazards. If you want rare drops, you can go after mini-bosses or treasure spaces. If you need some HP, enter a battle with a distress signal and try to rescue a hostage that will heal you if you succeed, or go to a camp to recover some of your damage. If you build up a lot of money, you can go to the store to power up yourself or your deck. While the maps are randomized, some spaces appear only once per stage, or typically only appear around a certain part of the map. There are 4 types of biomes, with certain types of enemies that tend to appear in each. After you beat a boss, you get 3 to choose from for your next map. And as you would expect, as you get further into a run, the enemies get stronger and the challenge gets harder. As for what makes this game a roguelite instead of a like, when you end a run, whether in victory or defeat, you get experience that builds up your file's level, which unlocks more cards and buffs that can drop on subsequent runs. The rest of the unlocks revolve around the game's characters. There are 9 playable characters, which also serve as the game's bosses. The shopkeeper is an optional brutal fight, while for the other 8, you select 1 to fight with and the other 7 will block your path. Each biome has 2 possible characters that can appear at the end of, so you kinda can control what order you go up against them in. Which, given that the further in you face them, the more HP and the more aggressive they'll be, so trying to plan a route can be especially vital. When you do beat a boss, you have 2 options, to either kill or spare them. Finishing them off will give you better drops as you'd expect. Sparing them, though, will have them heal both of you for 400 HP and then run off. It doesn't end there, though, as they'll sometimes reappear to aid you, showing up at the start of battle for an assist, showing up at camps to give you an extra something, and one in particular actually blocking a fatal blow for you and granting a small heal so that you can continue your run. Even more interesting, it can sometimes work the other way around, you getting defeated by a boss but them sparing you instead. Each character has their own odds for doing this, though killing other characters or hostages makes this chance go down. The final boss will vary depending on whether you spare everyone, decide on a person-to-person basis, or kill them all. But I started this section talking about unlocks, so let's bring it back around. You start out only being able to play as Saffron, but if you defeat a boss far enough into your run, they too become playable. Each character has a basic weapon, as well as a passive buff and 4 cards that they start with. They also have alternate starting sets, and costumes that you can unlock as you clear certain conditions. Each plays really different, and I've really only learned the starting character, Saffron, to any real degree. The game doesn't really do much in the story department. each person trying to get into Eden but standing in each other's way. Even going out of my way to specifically try to find the game's plot and each individual's backstory really didn't net much, and you can only glean a few bits and pieces to each one's personality and motivation from the character select and in-game lines. That said, each character has such a strong design, and what little information's there just serves to make me want to know more, that just about all of them have been totally endeared to me. With the exception of maybe Shiso, who seems a little too boring, and Terra, who is an asshole. Saffron is easy to use and thus very reliable. Plus, as the character I largely used, is the most familiar and emblematic of the game for me. Riva's very kind, being the one most likely to spare you and will rescue you in a pinch. Gunner fights in the most straightforward manner and comes across as very brash, though in an endearing way. Slicey is both a metaphorical and literal Ice Queen and seems a bit edgy, which, as quite possibly the youngest member of the cast, seems appropriate instead of cringy. Hazel's constantly building structures, giving me the impression that she's a hard worker and earnest. I already said Terra was an asshole. There's a part of me that likes how high and mighty she comes across and how chaotic her battles are, but another part of me hates how cheap some of her combos can be. And one other thing. Shiso seems more mercenary than the rest and comes across as more stoic, hence why he seems kinda boring. Violet is elegant and treats fights more like musical performances, and accepts defeat the most gracefully, to the point where it seems odd that she's even taking part in a fight to the death. The shopkeeper puts even Shiso to shame when it comes to an obsession with money, being very enthusiastic about her job. Cross her though, and she becomes very violent and quite sadistic. Probably why she's the very optional and very hard boss battle. With all of these, I could be projecting and reading between the lines too much, but that's just how strong of an impression these characters have made on me, especially with all the time I've spent with them. Speaking of which, despite a successful run taking maybe a bit longer than 30 minutes, it took me around 15 hours to get a win. I originally picked this up after hearing it compared to another video game that I love, and when I first started playing it, I got repeatedly destroyed. I played to the point where I could get to the second or third world, then put it down for an extended period of time since I didn't seem to be making much headway. I picked it back up a few months ago, and somehow this time, I started being able to clear the fourth world and unlock the other characters. Though, given that I couldn't pick any of them up super quick, I defaulted back to Saffron since she seemed the most likely option I had if I wanted to make progress. I would play the game off and on, doing a few runs at a time whenever the mood struck me. I started getting to the point where I could reach World 5 or 6 and was under the impression that that would be the furthest I could reach. As I mentioned just a few weeks ago, I was ready to throw in the towel and make it just something I would play on the side for fun with no real hope that I would ever get those credits. And then something crazy happened. I reached the final boss for the Merciful route, and they seemed beatable and suddenly I couldn't give it up. I became convinced that if I could just get in the zone, in addition to deciding on the correct focus and getting the right set of drops, I could do it. I managed to get to the final boss several times, getting really into it, and this week I finally cleared it and got one of the endings. And with that, I'm ready to discuss maybe not the best strategy, but at least my strategy for clearing the game. First and foremost, I used Saffron, since her passive buff gave you one revive throughout the run, giving you a safety net, and having a very basic weapon that at least gave you some method of dealing damage, even if you didn't turn up any good cards. I'd go for high rewards early on, then play it safe as things got harder. For my focus, I'd go for Misery, which was largely poison focus, so I could get passive damage, and Anima, since these tended to do decent damage, along with some bonus from effects like Frost and Flame. Some enemies also move around a lot, so if I had the option for cards that I didn't actually need to aim, I'd typically pick it. My ideal boss order was Riva, Slicey, Terra, Violet, Gunner, Hazel, Shiso, then obviously final boss, trying to put the easier fights last. Consider that a suggestion for new players and an invitation to compare notes for veterans. In case it's not obvious, I am completely smitten with this game. It feels very much like a roguelike version of Mega Man Battle Network, with the grid-based battlefield and the card-based attacks being very reminiscent of Battle Chips. Beyond just the obvious inspiration, there's also a ton of other game references baked into the chip and buff descriptions, the various characters containing a few as well, making it very clear that the makers of One Step from Eden are huge fans of the medium. The whole game feels like such a passion project. The format does seem pretty niche, so I can see a lot of people passing on it, but I just love it so much that here's what I'm gonna say. Look. Look at the screen. Look at what I'm doing. Does this seem like the sort of thing you'd want to mess with? Are you maybe a Battle Network fan? Are you gamer enough to handle it? If yes to any of those questions, please consider picking this up. I want to see more people playing One Step from Eden. I want to talk to people about it. More than that though, I want to see such a finely crafted game succeed. I love learning the ins and outs of it, and I'm still figuring stuff out. In addition to that, I love how my success was a combination of me not only getting better at it, but also unlocking better drops, and I still don't know how much I should attribute to each. I might have cleared the game and am taking it off the backlog, but I'm not done fiddling with it yet. I want to try learning some of the other characters, getting some more of the endings, and maybe even unlocking the final character, Shopkeeper, eventually. This might just become a game that I stream when I don't have anything else queued up or just need to relax. I simply adore it. I also 100%ed Kirby in the Forgotten Land. That's right, I saved all of the Waddle Dee, proving what a stellar person I am and getting a shiny little reward for my trouble. More than that though, I tackled the post-game with its fewer but much longer levels. It feels weird to say that it was hard, since I did manage to get through them without dying as well, but then again, I did do a bit of prep beforehand that if I had skipped, I might have taken an L. It still was very doable though. What really got me was the final arena challenge. This kicked my ass several times. This was due partly to them throwing tweaked bosses at me. Their movesets altered enough from the ones that I was used to dealing with to majorly throw me off, to them downgrading the limited maximum tomatoes you had to heal with between rounds to just regular, less effective standard tomatoes, to them bringing out one last, new boss that I had no experience with, and hence no idea of their attack patterns, and I could only practice against after clearing 11.5 other battles. Upon defeat, I could restart the round at the cost of 100 star coins, with the price increasing by 100 each time, though if I screwed up enough, I would just quit. I have no idea how many times it took me to clear this challenge. My best guess would be 5, though I would not bet money on it. On my final try, I managed to plan and prep enough that I cleared it without using a continue, though it was still closer than I would have liked. After that, it was just a matter of mopping up the last odds and ends, most of which involved pitching coins into the most expensive gachapon machine. But once I was done, I got a 100% clear graphic, and congratulations, and that was it. I gotta admit, with all the hidden little elements that I had to track down, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to accomplish this, but I managed to do so without even looking up a guide, so I'm pretty pleased with myself. Like I believe I mentioned last week, as easy as most Kirby games are, there are typically some challenge, either in the post-game or collecting everything, and both were certainly true this time around. This game is still a big recommendation from me. Oh, and this happened. I legitimately don't know how. I was just playing a few rounds to get my daily tickets. I thought things were going pretty well, but I didn't think too much of it. At one point I figured, hey, we're probably getting near the end, glanced to my right and noticed that there were only 2 of us left. A few seconds later, it was all over, and I sat somewhat dumbfounded as the jingle of KO tokens started pouring in and the screen switched to this. The best I'd gotten before this was either 3rd or 4th, so there was a large part of me that thought that this would never happen, so I was quite thrilled. Going back to the main menu unlocked a new player icon, which I switched out due to vanity, and a new mode for Maximus winners only that I didn't even know existed. Tetris99, have you been hiding this from me? Wait, is this supposed to be a secret? Will I be banished from the Tetris community for talking about it? I'm not sure I'm confident enough to give it a try, though. Either way, I'm really happy that I finally managed to take number 1 and have the somewhat greedy hope that it won't be the only time I do so. But seriously, I have no idea how big of a deal this is. Do most 99 players manage to get a Maximus now and again? And wow, I got that Tetris win while I was still writing the script, so I was really just expecting to talk about those first 2 games. I feel very accomplished this week. All this brings the backlog to 111, so thanks for watching. Maybe subscribe if you enjoyed this sort of thing, and perhaps I'll see you next episode.